Okay, so we last saw the fish circulatory system, and if you recall, the blood gets pressurized one time as it leaves the heart, and then it has to go through the lungs, I'm not the lungs, but the gills, and all the way back through the body, and all the way back to the heart again. So it's not going to be the most efficient way to get high blood pressure throughout the whole body, to get efficient distribution of blood and oxygen through the body. Now, amphibians, the next group to diverge on the phylogenetic tree, they have a slightly more complex system. So let's look at how they do it. Here we have their heart. Their heart has three chambers: a left atrium, a right atrium, and a single ventricle. But that ventricle has kind of a ridge of tissue in it that kind of separates one side of the heart from the other, but not completely. Okay? So what happens here? Well, oxygen-poor blood comes from the body. So that's blood that's given up its oxygen to the feet and the brain and everywhere else. And it comes back to the right atrium here. And then it goes into the right side of the ventricle, where it's pumped and pressurized. And there it comes up. It goes up here on what they call the Pulmocutaneous Circuit. So let's break that down. Pulmonary means lung, and cutaneous means skin. So if you have forgotten, frogs have lungs, which we haven't really talked about yet, so I'll tell you that right now. Frogs have lungs, but they can also breathe through their skin. They can do gas exchange through their skin. So cutaneous means skin. So this means the lungs and skin. So when they're underwater, they only send blood to their skin instead of their lungs, since they're holding their breath, right? So this can come up, this blood comes up, goes through all the capillaries of the lungs and skin, then comes back to the left side of the heart, the left atrium, where it enters into the ventricle. It gets pressurized again a second time. It leaves, comes up, goes to the body, gives all the oxygen up to the body, and then returns to the right side of the heart. Now, this is almost what we do as mammals. However, there is a difference. This division here is not complete. So some of the oxygen-poor blood and some of the oxygen-rich blood mix together in the ventricle. So it's not pure. They show it as kind of purple here. You end up getting some of that blood mixed together. So it's not 100% efficient. Okay? But you do pressurize that blood a second time, so it's under more pressure as it goes through the rest of the body. So it's going to flow more quickly through the body. It's going to distribute oxygen a little more quickly and things like that, and food, and come back to the heart and get pressurized again. So it's pressurized twice, as it leaves the heart for gas exchange and as it leaves the heart to go to the body. Now, in reptiles, we actually have more of a wall between the left and right side of the heart. However, the wall still has a bit of a gap to it, and so it's still technically three-chambered heart, and you still get the mixing of some of that oxygen-rich and poor blood a little bit in most of the reptiles, the snakes, the lizards, the turtles. However, in birds and in alligators and crocodiles and in mammals, we have a true four-chambered heart, which is pretty cool. So let's look at the cartoon of the amphibian heart real quick. In an amphibian heart, you have a pump, that's that ventricle. It pumps blood to the lungs. In the lungs or the skin, it becomes oxygen-rich. It comes back to that same pump and gets pressurized again, and then it might mix with some oxygen-poor blood, which is why I added this purple into it. It gets pressurized again, and then it goes to the body and returns to the pump again. So it's pressurized twice, but how could we improve this system? If we want to have as much oxygen-rich blood under high pressure going to the body as possible, we're going to need to figure out a way to keep the oxygen-poor and rich blood from mixing together. Now, here's what birds, alligators, mammals have done. We have evolved a true four-chambered heart. We have what we might call a septum, or a wall between the left and right side of that heart. Okay? And here we have a left ventricle and a left atrium, a right ventricle and a right atrium. Oxygen-poor blood comes into the right side, the right atrium, where it is then let into the right ventricle. It's pressurized under high pressure. It goes through the pulmonary circuit, which is the vessels that flow to and from the lungs. It goes into the lungs, becomes oxygen-rich, comes back to the left side of the heart, to the ventricle, where it then enters to the atrium, where it then enters into the left ventricle, where it's pressurized again. There's no mixing of blood because of this wall between the two. That blood then flows to through the systemic capillaries. That's the capillaries that go to the rest of the body, the systemic circuit, which then gas exchange takes place. The body picks up all that oxygen, all that food from the digestive system and things, and also the blood picks up carbon dioxide and nitrogen waste and things like that, and the blood returns back to the right side of the heart. So it's pressurized twice, but there's no mixing of the blood. So what we see here is something like this. We have two pumps, essentially, a left ventricle and a right ventricle. So right ventricle, left ventricle in this case. And we have a wall between the two. And so oxygen-poor blood becomes oxygenated, goes to the left side, gets pumped again to the body, where it circles back around again. So in this case, we don't have a mixing of oxygen-poor and rich blood, and it works quite well. So here we see a cladogram. We'll learn more about this cladogram later, but let's just have a look. Here's the fish with their two-chambered heart. You can see that on the cladogram here. Here's amphibians with a three-chambered heart. Then we have the evolution of the four-chambered heart in mammals, and a separate evolution of a four-chambered heart in the ancestor of crocodiles, birds, and dinosaurs. So probably dinosaurs had a four-chambered heart as well. So you can see that quite clearly here on the cladogram. So crocodiles and birds and probably dinosaurs could be a little more metabolically active, in some cases anyway, than perhaps some of the other reptiles. All right, so we're going to pick up from there. In the next video, we'll talk a bit more about the human cardiovascular system.